My name is Alice. I'm 29 years old, and I live in Houston, Texas, where I was born and raised. At least, that's what I always believed. Until 6 months ago, when my entire life turned out to be built on carefully crafted lies. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories go. I grew up thinking I had the perfect family, the kind you see in TV commercials. My dad, Robert, was the manager at a car dealership. My mom, Patricia, was an elementary school teacher. My older brother Michael is 33 and works as an accountant. We were always really close, or at least I thought we were. We lived in a nice suburban house in Katy, a family-friendly neighborhood on the outskirts of Houston, with a well-kept lawn and neighbors who always waved hello. I went to the local public school, had a normal childhood. Friends, summer camp, family dinners every Friday. My parents were involved, showing up to every school play and all my high school softball games. Michael protected me from bullies, helped me with my math homework, and even taught me how to drive before I took my official lessons. By all appearances, we were a tight-knit, happy family. I graduated with a nursing degree from the University of Houston 7 years ago. I've always wanted to help people, and nursing seemed like the perfect fit. I got a job at Texas Children's Hospital right after graduation, starting in general pediatrics before specializing in pediatric oncology. It was emotionally draining work, but rewarding in ways I can't really put into words. Seeing kids fight terrible illnesses but still hold on to hope taught me something new every day. I met my husband, James, 5 years ago at a charity event the hospital hosted. He was a corporate lawyer for a big firm downtown. They're representing one of the sponsors. He was handsome, smart, with this calm, confident vibe that drew me in immediately. We talked all night, and when he asked me out to dinner the next week, I said yes without a second thought. Our relationship progressed naturally. He met my family after about 3 months of dating, and everyone loved him. My mom said James was exactly the kind of steady guy she'd always pictured for me. My dad liked talking sports and politics with him. Michael and him hit it off. They'd even go watch Texans games together sometimes. We got married 2 years after we met, in a beautiful ceremony at a winery just outside the city. Michael was James's best man, and my college best friend Rebecca was my maid of honor. My parents cried during the vows. Happy tears, I thought. It was one of the best days of my life, surrounded by everyone I loved, starting a new chapter with a man I adored. James and I bought a house in the Heights, an up-and-coming neighborhood full of charming restored old houses and a vibrant young community. It was the life I'd always dreamed of, a meaningful career, a solid marriage, a close family. We had monthly dinners at my parents' house, spent every holiday together, celebrated every birthday as a group. I was genuinely happy, or at least I thought I was. Looking back now, I see all the red flags I ignored, the little inconsistencies my brain explained away because the alternative was too crazy to consider. Like how my parents never had any baby pictures of me, always saying they were lost in a big Houston flood back in the 90s. How I didn't have an original birth certificate, just a copy issued when I needed a passport at 18. How my mom would always change the subject when I'd ask about her pregnancy, my birth, whether I was an easy baby. How Michael, my supposedly 4 years older brother, didn't seem to have any real memories of me as a baby or toddler. He'd always say he was too young to remember, but 4 years old is old enough for at least some fuzzy memories. All these little signs my mind filed away as no big deal because I trusted my family completely. The truth started to unravel last November, 6 months ago. It was Thanksgiving, and we were all gathered at my parents' house like always. I was 29, James was 32. And we'd been married for 3.5 years. We'd started talking seriously about having kids, maybe trying next year when I turned 30. I was excited, picturing our kids growing up near their grandparents, with Michael as the cool uncle. After dinner, while the women cleaned up the kitchen, following that old-school tradition my mom insisted on, I overheard my dad and Michael talking in the living room. Their voices were low but had that urgent tone that makes you listen even when you don't mean to. I was in the pantry putting away leftovers when I heard my name. Michael was saying something about me asking questions again about when I was a baby, and that mom needed to have better answers ready. My dad replied that they didn't get why I was suddenly so interested in the past, that they should have been more careful with the whole story from the start. I froze right there in the pantry, holding a container of cranberry sauce, trying to wrap my head around what I was hearing. What story? Why did they need prepared answers about my childhood? Before I could process it, my mom walked into the living room and told them to keep it down that I might hear. There was a sudden silence. I stood there for a few more seconds, then came out acting like nothing happened. But I had heard, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, back home with James, I told him what I'd overheard. He was confused, tried to brush it off like maybe I'd misheard, that there had to be an innocent explanation. But I saw the worry in his eyes too. He knew me well enough to know my gut feelings were usually right. In the days that followed, I couldn't let it go. I started asking my mom more direct questions. I called her a few days after Thanksgiving and specifically asked about my birth. What hospital was I born in? Who was the doctor? Did she have any pictures from the hospital? Patricia got visibly uncomfortable even over the phone. I could hear it in her voice. She said I was born at Memorial Hermann Hospital, that the doctor was a Dr. Morrison who'd passed away, and that she didn't have pictures because cameras weren't allowed in delivery rooms back then. It all sounded rehearsed. When I pushed for more details, natural or C-section, how long was she in labor, she got irritated. She said I was being weird and obsessive, that she didn't get why I was suddenly grilling her about stuff from almost 30 years ago. Her defensiveness just made me more suspicious. I started digging on my own. First, I tried to get my full birth certificate, not just the copy I had. I went in person to the Texas Department of State Health Services in Austin, pretending I needed a certified copy for work. The clerk searched the system using my full name, Alice Marie Henderson, my birthday, Houston. Took longer than usual. She frowned at her screen, typed some more, then told me there was an inconsistency in the records and she'd need more time to locate it. She asked me to come back in a week. That was alarming. Birth certificates don't have inconsistencies, unless something's wrong. I went back a week later, and the same clerk, an older woman named Margaret, took me to a private room. She looked uncomfortable as she explained that my birth certificate had been issued when I was 3 years old, not at birth. That was unusual but happened in cases of late adoptions or when original records were lost. I asked if that meant I was adopted. Margaret said she didn't have that info, just that the certificate was issued in 1998, the year I turned 3. I felt the floor drop out from under me. 3 years old. So what happened for the first 3 years of my life? Why was there no original record? Margaret suggested I talk to my parents, that they'd surely have an explanation. But deep down I knew if I asked them straight up, I'd just get more lies. I needed another way. I decided to hire a private investigator. James thought it was overkill at first, that we should just confront my parents. But I argued that if they'd been hiding something for almost 30 years, they wouldn't just spill it now. We needed facts first. I found an investigator named Marcus Chen through a recommendation from one of James's colleagues. Marcus was a former cop who now specialized in family and identity cases. I sat down with him in his office in Montrose and told him everything I knew, or rather, everything I didn't know. Marcus listened carefully, took notes, and told me cases like mine weren't as rare as I'd think. Sometimes families did informal adoptions, especially back when regulations were looser. He said he'd start by checking public records, trying to track down any documentation about me before 1998. That was the beginning of a discovery that would change everything. Marcus worked for 3 weeks. During that time I kept up appearances. I still went to family dinners, made plans for Christmas, acted like nothing was wrong. But inside I was a wreck, waiting every day for Marcus to call. James was worried. He could see I wasn't sleeping, that I was losing weight from the stress. He supported me completely but was also scared of what we'd find. He said no matter what, we were still us and he'd be by my side. That was the only thing keeping me going. Marcus finally called 2 weeks before Christmas. He said he'd found significant information and we needed to talk in person. I went to his office that afternoon with James. Marcus sat us down and put a folder on the table. Inside were documents, copies of records, even some old photos. He started explaining what he'd found. There was no record of an Alice Marie Henderson being born in Houston in 1995. He'd checked all the hospitals, all the certificates. My name didn't exist until 1998. But he'd found something else. In January 1996, a roughly 5-month-old girl named Lily Anne Morrison was reported missing from San Antonio, Texas, about a 3-hour drive from Houston. The mother, Jennifer Morrison, was 19 at the time, a single mom struggling with addiction. The child was reported missing, but the case went cold. There were suspicions back then that the mom had sold or given away the baby. Marcus put a photo on the table, an old newspaper clipping from the time of the disappearance. It was the missing baby, Lily Anne Morrison. I looked at that photo and it was like looking at the few baby pictures I had of myself from around age 3 or 4. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes, the same face shape, the same little birthmark near the left eye. Marcus continued. He'd managed to contact Jennifer Morrison, now 44 and living in Dallas. She'd been clean for 12 years and worked at a rehab center. When Marcus mentioned the name Alice Henderson and showed her a recent photo of me, Jennifer started crying. She said she'd always known Lily was alive somewhere. Jennifer told him that in January 1996, she was in a desperate spot. She owed money to dealers, was about to be evicted, had no food. A couple showed up, she never knew how they found her, offering help. They said they could give the baby a better, stable life. They offered money, enough for Jennifer to pay off her debts and start over. Young, addicted, and terrified, she agreed. She handed over Lily to this couple, took the money, and moved to Dallas. She reported the disappearance weeks later when she was more lucid, but it was too late. She had no info on the couple. I sat there in Marcus's office, holding that newspaper photo of a missing baby who was apparently me, trying to process it all. My parents weren't my parents. They'd bought a baby from a desperate, addicted mom almost 30 years ago. They'd raised me, given me a good life, but it was all based on a lie and a crime. James was pale next to me, holding my hand tight. Marcus said gently that if I wanted, he could help report this. Illegal child buying, document forgery, identity fraud, they were serious crimes. But he said I needed to think carefully because once I started that process, there was no going back. I left that office in shock. James drove home because I was shaking too much. When we got there, I just sat on the couch and cried for hours. I cried for the baby I was, taken from a mom who, even in awful circumstances, had given birth to me. I cried for the girl I'd grown up as, Alice Henderson, who apparently never really existed. I cried for the parents I'd loved and trusted, who turned out to be liars and criminals. James stayed with me, not trying to fix it with words, just being there. When I had no tears left, we talked about what to do. James, ever the lawyer, laid out the options. Go to the police, confront my parents privately first, or let it all slide and keep living the lie. That last one was impossible. I couldn't look at them knowing the truth and pretend I didn't. I decided I needed to know more. I asked Marcus to set up a meeting with Jennifer Morrison. I needed to meet the woman who gave birth to me. We met 3 days later at a coffee shop in Dallas. James came with me. I got there early, a nervous wreck. When Jennifer walked in, I recognized her right away. Not because she looked like me, though there were similarities, but because of the mix of hope and fear on her face. She walked slowly to my table, sat down, and we just stared at each other. Then she said, in a broken voice, that she'd dreamed of this moment for 29 years. Talking to her was devastating and eye-opening. She told me everything. Her abusive childhood, her addiction, getting pregnant at 18, the boyfriend who left. She tried to stay clean during the pregnancy but relapsed after I was born. She loved me desperately but was dying with no money, no support. That's when the couple showed up. She doesn't remember exactly how, but she remembers the day she handed me over. She remembered holding me one last time, kissing my head, thinking she was giving me a better chance. The couple paid her $20,000. They took all my documents. She used the money to pay off life-threatening debts and fled to Dallas. When she sobered up enough to realize what she'd done, she reported it. But with no names, no proof, the police didn't do much. It took her years to get clean for good. She's been sober 12 years now, but never stopped thinking about me. Hearing her story was complicated. Part of me was angry at her for selling me. But a bigger part understood she was basically a kid herself. Addicted, terrified, with no way out. My parents, on the other hand, were established adults who made a calculated choice. I asked Jennifer if she remembered anything about the couple. She closed her eyes, thinking back through the haze of nearly 30 years and addiction. She said the man was tall, dark-haired, spoke with an authority that intimidated her. The woman was shorter, light brown hair, cried when she first held the baby. Generic descriptions. But then she mentioned the man had a small scar near his left ear from a childhood accident. My dad has that exact scar. He always said it was from falling off his bike when he was 7. That detail confirmed it beyond any doubt. Robert and Patricia Henderson were the couple. Before we left Dallas, Jennifer asked timidly if we could stay in touch, if there was any chance of a relationship. I looked at this woman, my biological mother, and honestly didn't know. I said I needed time, but she had my number. She accepted that with a grace I didn't deserve, just grateful to have seen me, to know I was okay. The drive back to Houston was long. James and I talked about next steps. It was clear I had to confront my parents, but I wanted to do it in a way they couldn't lie or deny anymore. I wanted answers. Why? Christmas was in a week. My parents always hosted a big Christmas Eve dinner with extended family. It would be the perfect stage. I spent that week preparing. Marcus gave me copies of everything. Documents, his report, even an audio recording of his interview with Jennifer. James helped me organize it. I also talked to a criminal lawyer. He confirmed my parents could face years in prison. He told me to think hard because once I started this, I couldn't stop it. I'd already thought. They'd taken my identity, my history, my biological mother from me. They'd built a whole life on a crime. Yeah, they gave me a good childhood. Yeah, they probably loved me in their own way. But love built on such a fundamental lie isn't real love. It's selfishness disguised as care. They deserved to face consequences. Christmas Eve came. I wore something simple and black. James was nervous, asking if I was sure. It was. We got to my parents' house at 6 p.m. Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, James's parents. My mom was in the kitchen, my dad entertaining. Michael was there with his new girlfriend, Sarah. Everyone was happy, festive, clueless. We waited until after the main course before dessert. My dad was about to make his traditional toast when I stood up. Everyone looked at me surprised. My mom looked at me with alarm. I started calmly, saying I'd discovered something about my past that changed everything. The room went quiet. I explained about the birth certificate, the investigator. I saw my dad turning red, my mom going pale. Michael looked confused. Then I put the newspaper photo on the table, the picture of the missing baby from San Antonio. I explained who Lily Anne Morrison was, about Jennifer, how the baby was sold. Everyone looked between the photo and me, seeing the resemblance. Then I looked straight at my parents and said, "The couple who bought that baby was you. I'm not Alice Henderson. I'm Lily Morrison." Total silence. Then my dad stood up abruptly, said this was ridiculous, that I was having a breakdown. But my mom just sat there, tears starting to fall. I knew she wouldn't deny it. I asked them directly, my voice steady even though I was shaking inside. Did they buy a baby from an addicted mom in San Antonio in January 1996? Did they bring me to Houston, hide me for 3 years, then register me with a fake identity? Did they spend 30 years lying to me, to everyone, about who I really was? My dad tried to speak again, but my mom put her hand on his arm to stop him. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said in a broken voice, "Yes, it's true." The room exploded. People started talking all at once, some in shock, some in denial. James's parents looked horrified. Michael just sat there, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. I let the chaos go on for a moment, then banged on the table for silence. When it was quiet, I turned to Michael and asked how long he'd known. I saw the truth on his face before he spoke. He knew. Maybe not everything, but he knew something wasn't right. He admitted our parents told him when he was 16, when I started asking about baby pictures for a school project. They said I'd been informally adopted, that it was complicated, that it was for my own good not to know. He was 16, he said defensively. He trusted our parents, but he'd kept the secret for 13 years as an adult. That betrayal from Michael hurt almost as much as my parents. I told the room I'd given my parents countless chances to tell me the truth. Every time I asked, they chose the lie. They chose their secret over my right to know. And now I had a decision to make about reporting this to the authorities. My dad finally found his voice. He said if I did that, I'd destroy the family, send them to prison, ruin everything. I said they destroyed the family the moment they bought a stolen baby. They ruined everything by building a life on a crime. The consequences were theirs to face. My Aunt Carol asked if there wasn't a way to handle this privately, as a family, without the police. I looked at her and asked, if your daughter was taken and sold, would you want justice, or would you want the guilty protected by family? The question hung in the air. Then James's parents stood up. His dad said calmly they understood it was a complex family situation, but they couldn't stay knowing what they now knew. They needed time to process, and they'd be there for me and James. They left, and that seemed to give others permission to go. Within 15 minutes, it was just me, James, my parents, Michael, and Sarah left. Sarah was clearly uncomfortable. Michael eventually said they were leaving too, that he needed time to think. Before he left, he looked at me and asked if I was really going to destroy our parents. I said I had no choice. They destroyed themselves. When it was just the four of us, we finally talked. My mom was crying openly. My dad had his head in his hands. Asked why. Why not adopt legally? My dad looked up and explained. They'd tried. Patricia couldn't have kids due to a medical issue. They tried agencies but kept getting rejected. Robert's age, their finances, something always came up. They were getting desperate. My mom especially was obsessed with having a baby. Then, through a work connection, they heard about a young, addicted mom in San Antonio with a baby she couldn't care for, willing to let the child go for a price. They saw it as an opportunity, as rescuing a child. They knew it was illegal, but they wanted a baby more than they cared about the law. I asked if they ever considered that I had a biological mom who might want to find me, that I had a right to know who I was. My mom shook her head. They assumed the addicted mom would never recover, never look. They thought they were giving me a better life. That arrogance made me furious. I said it wasn't their decision to make. They stole my identity and my history because they wanted a child and couldn't get one the right way. I left my parents' house that night knowing I'd never go back as their daughter. James drove in silence. When we got home, I just sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I'd done what I planned, exposed the truth, forced a confession. But I didn't feel triumphant, just empty. In the days after Christmas, the story spread fast. My job was understanding and gave me time off. I spent it talking to lawyers. The criminal lawyer was clear. If I filed a report, my parents would be arrested, face serious charges, likely get prison time. I'd have to testify. The media would pick it up. It would be a circus. As for my identity, it would be a process, but I could correct my records, get a real birth certificate, decide if I wanted to keep Alice or go back to Lily. It was overwhelming. Jennifer called a few days after Christmas. We talked for 2 hours. She asked if there was a chance we could meet again, build some kind of relationship. I said honestly I didn't know, but I wasn't ruling it out. In early January I made my decision. After a lot of thought, long talks with James, and seeing a therapist, I decided to report it. Not for revenge, but because it was right. A crime had been committed. My parents needed to face real consequences. Jennifer deserved some justice. And I deserved my real identity back. I filed a formal report with the Houston police, gave them all the documentation, the recording, everything. Within a week, my parents were arrested. Charges: Illegal child buying, document forgery, identity fraud. They made bail, but the process would be long. Michael called after the arrest, furious. He said I'd gone too far, that I'd destroyed the family out of pride and vengeance. I told him calmly I hadn't destroyed anything. Our parents did that 30 years ago with their choices. I was just seeking truth and justice. He hung up on me. We haven't spoken since. I lost the brother I'd had my whole life. But I wonder if I ever really had a brother when our relationship was based on a lie he knew about and kept. The criminal trial took 4 months. The media grabbed the story, just as predicted. I had to testify. It was torturous but necessary. Jennifer testified too, sharing her story. She looked at my parents in court and said she understood their desperation for a child, but it didn't justify what they did. They took her daughter and took away that daughter's identity. In the end, my parents pleaded guilty in a deal. They got 3 years each, would serve at least 18 months before parole eligibility, plus fines and community service. Watching them get led away in handcuffs was surreal. Part of me, the girl I grew up as, wanted to run and hug them, say it didn't matter. But it did matter. I sat next to James and Jennifer, who'd come for the sentencing, and watched in silence. In the months since, I've started rebuilding my identity. Legally, I changed my name back to Lily Anne Morrison, though everyone still calls me Alice. That's fine. I got my real birth certificate, the one from San Antonio with Jennifer listed as my mother. It was weird but validating. I've started building a cautious relationship with Jennifer. We have lunch monthly, talk on the phone weekly. It's strange getting to know your biological mom at 30, trying to build a bond without a lifetime of shared history. But she's patient, not pushing, just happy to be in my life in any way. She tells me about my family, my grandparents I never met. I'm discovering things about myself that make sense now. James has been my rock. Our talks about having kids are on hold while I process all this. He gets it. Says we have time. His unwavering support through all this showed me I picked the right partner, even when everything else turned out to be a lie. I went back to work at the hospital 2 months ago. It was tough at first. Everyone knew my story from the news, but my colleagues were supportive. Working with sick kids again reminded me there's suffering in the world way beyond my own, that life goes on and needs to be lived. As for the Hendersons, contact is minimal. I visited my mom once in prison. A short, awkward meeting where she cried and apologized over and over. She said she understood if I could never forgive her but wanted me to know her love for me was always real, even if it was built on a crime. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if love built on a fundamental lie can be real. But I also can't deny that my happy childhood memories felt real at the time. It's complicated. My dad didn't want to see me. Michael texted once, months after sentencing, just saying he hoped I was happy with the outcome, that the family was destroyed because of me. I didn't reply. There was no point trying to explain to someone who doesn't want to understand that exposing a crime isn't destroying a family. Committing the crime is. Looking back now, 6 months since that Christmas Eve, I don't regret my choices. Could have kept quiet. But I would have lived the rest of my life knowing the truth and pretending I didn't. That wouldn't be living. I've learned a lot about identity. Who you are isn't just a name on paper or blood in your veins. It's the sum of your experiences, choices, relationships. I grew up as Alice Henderson. Those experiences are real even if the name was fake. I'm Lily Morrison by birth. That identity was stolen but is being reclaimed. Can be both. I've learned that family is more complicated than blood or legal papers. Jennifer is my mom biologically. Patricia raised me. James is my chosen family. I don't need to categorize everything neatly. I can exist in the messy space in between. For anyone who discovers a fundamental lie about their identity or family, trust your gut. Seek the truth even when it scares you. Living a lie isn't really living. Remember that discovering a lie doesn't invalidate your life before. The person you became is real. Get support, therapist, lawyer, whatever you need. And know that justice looks different for everyone. There's no one right path, just the right one for you. Today, at 30 years old, I'm rebuilding my life with a new understanding of who I am. Lily Alice Morrison, daughter of Jennifer, who gave me life in terrible circumstances. The child Patricia and Robert bought and raised based on a crime. Wife of James who chose to stay. A nurse who cares for sick kids because life taught me that care matters. A survivor who sought truth when I could have chosen comfortable ignorance. This is my story. It's not pretty, not simple. There's no clean resolution where everyone learns a lesson and reconciles. It's messy and complicated and painful. But it's real. It's true. And after a lifetime of lies, the truth is all that matters. Thank you for listening all the way through. If this story spoke to you in any way, consider liking and subscribing. It really means a lot. Share it with someone who might understand this kind of pain. And in the comments, tell me if you've lived something similar, or if this story touched you the way it touched me.